Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. There's always been confusion and questions that have been asked about my illness, so I thought I'd just clear it up in one video and make people more aware, because what I have is really quite rare, but I'll explain more of that in a minute. So it all started, I was 19, I'm 22 now. I was working as a local singer, and also I was working in a school with nursery kids, and I absolutely loved it. I've always loved kids and I've always loved working with them. I used to do a dance and a singing group as well with them. So it literally was the perfect job for me. That was until one day when I was out at lunchtime looking after the kids on the schoolyard, and all of a sudden my eyes started feeling really itchy, and it was like behind my eyes was really painful. I'd had hay fever for around 6 years anyway, so I've always experienced like itchy eyes and things and teary eyes, but this was a totally new feeling. But I just shrug it off as hay fever anyway. I just thought that maybe it got worse. So I carried on looking after the children, and then when lunchtime was over and we went back into the class, my eyes were just getting worse and worse. And by the time I'd got back into the classroom and all the kids were there, and they were looking at me as if I was from a horror movie or something. They were like, "Miss, what is wrong with your face?" I thought that I just had itchy eyes and maybe they were a bit red. But then someone that was working with me told me to go and have a look in the mirror. So I went to look in the mirror, and my whole left eye had just drooped all the way down. It had literally just fallen, and also the whole left side of my face was like it was drooping down. It was kind of crazy because the kids were literally looking at me as if I was Frankenstein or something. So the pain got worse. My eye had drooped all the way down that I could barely see out of it. I had such an intense pain behind my eyes, and the light was really affecting my eyes, and I literally felt like I couldn't see. I felt like I was going blind. So they actually sent me home, and I had a nap when I got home, and by the time I woke up at tea time, it was fine. It had lifted back up. It wasn't perfect, but it was fine. Like, I could cope with it. So the next day I go back into work, and just like clockwork, everything happened again the exact way that it happened the first time. So again, it got increasingly worse and worse. So they sent me home. I went straight from the school on the second day, straight to the doctor's, made an emergency appointment, and I basically went in there and said, I think my hay fever's playing up, because, you know, because of Google we all think we're doctors, but I know, oh well. I thought it was hay fever, so he gave me stronger tablets. I was already on some sort of hay fever pill that I've always been on from the doctor. So he gave me a stronger pill, gave me some eye drops, so I went and tried those. This pattern literally went on for, I think, about 3 days, because in total I had left work and then visited the emergency doctor 4 times, and each time he just had a look at it, said, we're just going to have to give you the strongest tablets we've got and try some different drops on you, we'll see if that works. So this had been going on for around 4 days. In the daytime my eye would fall down, but by the time I'd had a nap and woken up, my eye was completely fine. So I wasn't really too worried about it at the time, and the doctor didn't seem too concerned either, so that put my mind at rest. Until one night when I was out with my grandparents at a restaurant, and all of a sudden this pain came and the headache that came with it, and my eye literally just dropped instantly. It wasn't gradual, it wasn't that I was itching it and it was falling and, you know, getting worse and worse. It literally just fell out of nowhere, and it was just completely down. So that's when I was a little bit confused, because I know that you can get hay fever at night and sometimes the pollen count is high at night, but this was crazy because all the windows were closed, no one was in the restaurant, so the door hadn't been opened and closed to the outside. It was all like a cordoned off room, no windows open, nothing. It was really strange that it happened out of the blue like that, because it never happened like that before. It was usually in the daytime, so I could kind of say, oh yeah, it's hay fever. But this time, there was no way that hay fever really... It would have been really random if it was hay fever, because everything was closed. There was nothing pointing to it being hay fever. So at that point it kind of changed our minds a little bit towards what was causing my problems. So I went home, and usually after I'd slept, the next morning I would just wake up completely fine. But unfortunately this didn't happen. The next morning I woke up and my eye was worse than it had ever been before. And every single time that I'd had a nap or went to sleep at night, it would always be back by the morning. But this time there was nothing. It was not picking up. Even if I stretched my eyes really big, my eye would still not budge much. So that kind of swayed us to think that maybe this was more than that. That was my 4th visit to the emergency doctor, and he said, okay, usually it's lifting itself back up, but this time it's not doing that. Why? We kind of thought maybe this isn't hay fever. So he said, well, I've seen you 4 times now, and usually it's lifted. Today it hasn't. I'm going to transfer you to the eye clinic in Bangor Hospital. And that was about 26 miles away, our local hospital. But he said he has to send me via the optician. So I went straight from there to the optician. He had a look at my eyes. He said, yeah, there's something not right there, but I can't really detect anything, but either way, we would have sent you to the hospital anyway. So we went from there to the hospital, to the eye casualty. The first day, they just had a look at my eye, put some dye in it, all sorts of tests, and they said, we want to see you tomorrow. So then the next day I went back, had some blood tests done, and literally it was my first ever blood test, and I cried like a baby, and it didn't even hurt. So I felt like a proper idiot. I saw the eye casualty doctors again, and they said again, oh, we want to see you tomorrow. So the day after that was the 3rd day in eye casualty. It was a Friday, and he said, okay, this is not making any sense to us. I'd seen maybe 8 professional eye doctors, specialists, and none of them knew what was wrong with me. So they said, we're gonna have to order an emergency MRI, but even though it's an emergency, it's still going to take weeks. In the meantime, if you get any more symptoms or if anything feels different, please make sure that you come here, or if it's, a really severe pain, go straight to A&E. So we left that day and we just had to wait for a referral for the MRI, but I didn't quite get there. The next day I went out with my grandma I mean. Sorry, I'm Welsh, so we call our grandma Nine. Yeah, my gran is my Nine. So I went out with her food shopping, and I was okay for about 20 minutes, and all of a sudden my eye was still dropped at this point. The pain behind my eyes, I'd had it before, but this one was unbearable, and the outside light just really hit me hard, and I couldn't cope with it, and I started literally screaming, crying. I had the biggest headache that was going all down the base of my skull, down my neck. We had to go home. I went home and I slept the whole day away, and I woke up the next morning and basically I was even 10 times worse than the day before. So I was literally screaming, crying. I had sunglasses on, then I had a jumper over my head, and then I had a dressing gown over my head. All the blinds were closed. I couldn't cope. I had ice packs everywhere. I was literally in the biggest pain ever. So my mum phoned the NHS because he'd told me to go into A&E. She just phoned just to make sure that was what we were meant to do. So she phoned, and the lady on the NHS helpline said, yeah, definitely take her in now and get her checked out. We went towards the hospital. It was crazy how much pain I was in. Looking back at the whole thing now, that probably was the peak of my pain. Obviously brain surgery and my lumbar puncture weren't brilliant, but that was up there with those. We rushed to the hospital. I did not care what I looked like at this point. I was in my pajamas, I had sunglasses on, I had a dressing gown over my head, and I was literally screaming, crying, but I didn't care. I was in so much pain that I did not care who saw me. The pain was a 10 out of 10. I'd never experienced pain like it before. Just someone whispering was enough to set me over the edge. I was hysterically crying. I had never been in that much pain in my whole life. As you know, with A&E, I'm sure yours is even worse probably, because we live in somewhere tiny and it's still really busy. And fair play, there were so many people there, but usually they see you kind of first come, first serve, unless it's an emergency. But thank God they saw that I was in so much pain, and probably because I was really annoying, because I was literally screaming the place down, so they were probably like, get this girl out of here right now. But they did, thank God. They took me through to the nurse, and because I was in so much pain, she... Hello? Hi. Okay, well, how long is this conversation going to be? Because I'm in the middle of a video. Can you phone me back in 20 minutes? Yeah, okay, bye. Damn daddies. So bless them, they literally took me in to see the nurse straight away. And usually after you see the nurse, you go back through to the waiting room and wait for the doctor to call you. but I was literally screaming so much that they put me in the nurse's room behind a curtain in a bed. But they literally were so amazing, and within about an hour they got me a room in the doctor's section of the A&E. So I was in my own little dark room off the doctor's ward. I had my boyfriend and his mum with me, and they stayed with me, bless them. And then my mum came afterwards. I saw so many doctors. I literally saw maybe 10 doctors that day. There was just an all-round doctor, there were eye specialists, there was an ophthalmologist, I don't know if that's the same thing, it probably is, whoops. And there was junior doctors and students and things, and they were all coming to see me, literally through my illness. I felt like I literally was like the main attraction in the zoo, because I saw so many junior doctors and medical students and doctors during my whole time while I was sick that year. Literally, there was hundreds of them. They were all like, oh my god, what's wrong with her? We don't know what's wrong with her. Look at this case. And it was crazy. They literally called me red herring. So I had loads of doctors look at me that day, all sorts of tests done, and they just couldn't pinpoint what was wrong with me. So they admitted me onto the ward. I was there from the 29th of July 2014. No, I'm lying. No, I'm not. Yeah. I was there from the 22nd of June 2014 until I was transferred to Walton on the 8th of July. I had a CT scan and it didn't pick up anything. I had blood tests. They weren't really picking up anything, just some things that didn't really have anything to do with my diagnosis. And basically, the more doctors saw me, the more confused they were with what was wrong with me. And then on the 4th of July, there's a neurologist that comes from Walton. I think he comes to Ysbyty Gwynedd on a Thursday and Friday, I think. He ordered another MRI of my head to be done so that he could see if there was any changes, and that was it. I think I'd gone to the canteen or somewhere like that. My mum was speaking to him on the ward. My mum actually didn't tell me this until after I was diagnosed, but he had gone and told my mum, from what we've seen, it's probably either going to be an inflammation on the brain, which was the best outcome, a bleed on the brain, or a brain tumour. So I was completely unaware of this. I just thought, oh god, my hay fever is so bad. You never think that something like that is going to happen to you, so I just thought, oh, I'll be in here for a couple of days and then I can go home and I'll be fine. But it didn't quite happen that way. So the day after I'd had the MRI, I was just in hospital. It was around lunchtime, and all of a sudden my mum was there, my boyfriend's parents were there, my boyfriend was there, my friends were there, my grandparents were there. What is going on here? Why is everyone here? Why are they letting you be here? Because, you know, they're so strict with like businesses and things. And then the neurologist came back up onto the ward and he said, Beth, your MRI is clear. So we think you just have an inflammation on the brain, but we're going to transfer you to Walton anyway just to see how we're going to treat it. Next minute, my mum, all emotional, and my grandparents were emotional, and everyone was emotional, and I was like, why are you guys getting all emotional over this? And that actually was when my mum told me that he had basically said it was either going to be an inflammation on the brain, or a bleed on the brain, or a brain tumour. And of course, brain tumour had really scared her, and she told all my friends and family about what he'd said. And of course, I didn't know this at that point, so after he'd said that it was pretty much probably an inflammation on the brain, then she told me that it could have been a brain tumour, and I was like, oh my god, I was wondering why they were all acting so weird. So look, I've never seen them so happy. They were so happy that I didn't have this horrible diagnosis. Yeah, so on the 8th I went to Walton. When I got there, there was a doctor there and he explained to me, okay, so we're going to do an MRI and you're also going to have a lumbar puncture. And that word literally made me want to cry. I had such a bad phobia of needles at the time, and the thought of a 6-inch needle going into your spine wasn't very nice, but I knew I needed a diagnosis, so I just said yes. Then on the 10th of July was the day that I was going to have my lumbar puncture. But in the morning I went for some acupuncture tests. Basically they put some needles into my forehead to see if the muscles behind my eyes were working and things like that. And then when I got back, I had a lumbar puncture done. This lumbar puncture was so painful. I can't even describe how painful it was. It went on for 25 minutes, and that is pretty much the max limit they can be inside your spine to try and get the fluid. So they had to stop the test. And then after that traumatic lumbar puncture, the neurologist came up to the ward with my results, and basically he said, you have a pineal tumour. And at the time I was like, what is this? Because I'd never heard of it. And he explained that it's in it's basically the exact center of your head. So if you put your fingers here, it's where they would meet in the middle, like the exact center of your head. It was pressing on some things that had made my eye fall. It was giving me these awful headaches and things. But at the time, he assured me that, you know, they would monitor it and nothing needed to be done at that point. I believed him, of course, because he was a neurologist, and I thought, okay, so I've got a brain tumour, but it's all good, it's not going to do anything, because apparently loads of people had it. But afterwards I found out basically loads of people have something called pineal cysts in their brains, but it's something that is not symptomatic at all because it's small and people usually only find them in people's postmortems. But what he didn't tell me was that because of the size of my tumour and where it was pressing on, it could be symptomatic. But what he didn't tell me is that in very, very, very rare cases, if they are pressing on the right things and they're big enough, they can be very symptomatic and they can cause all sorts of symptoms. But at the time of my diagnosis, because of the way they told me, it didn't really affect me that much. But I feel like if it was my mum or if it was my sister or my friend, I would be absolutely heartbroken, breaking down. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. But when it happens to you, you kind of just don't believe it, I guess. It didn't really affect me mentally. I didn't really realise how dangerous it was and, you know, what it was doing to my life, and I didn't think that what happened in the next year was going to happen at all. But of course my mum was absolutely heartbroken. All my family and friends were heartbroken because, you know, they'd sat by me in my local hospital and they told me, no, you don't have a brain tumour, and they were all so happy. And then about 6 days later they were told that actually, yeah, I do have a brain tumour. So I can't imagine how that was on them, but I think I handled it okay because, again, when it happens to you, it's different. I can't explain it, but if it happened to one of them, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. So I totally understand that they were broken. But thank God they really hid their emotions and, you know, tried to be positive around me and keep things happy. And yeah, they were all amazing, all of them. So the day after my traumatic lumbar puncture, a senior consultant came up to me and said, can I try? And I was like, oh my God, I just had an awful experience with it. I really don't want a needle going in my back again. But of course they needed a fluid, so I went through it. This one literally maybe lasted about 5 minutes and I didn't feel a thing. So it was okay. So that day I didn't really get any of the symptoms from the lumbar puncture, but I did keep having headaches, pain behind my eyes. I keep forgetting actually, from the day that my eye dropped, I wore sunglasses every single day, inside, outside. I was going into Tesco in the winter and people thought I was absolutely crazy, but the light just affected my eyes so much that I could not cope with it whatsoever. On the day after the lumbar puncture, I was feeling okay, so they let me go to Liverpool for lunch with my grandparents, my mum, my sisters and my boyfriend. The only thing I did really experience from the lumbar puncture was my back was really painful in the bottom, but you know, after getting a 6-inch needle in your back twice, it's probably gonna hurt. So I was walking fine, but I had a lot of problems with my back. I was, you know, just taking it slow and things. So after we'd been out for food, I went back to the hospital and all was good. And then the next day I got up to go and change in the bathroom, and the lady across the ward from me, my amazing friend Carol, turned to me and she was like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you walking so weird? I didn't even realise that I was walking weird. And I looked down and I noticed, and my knees were kind of collapsing underneath me, kind of like a jelly leg every few steps. When I was standing, it was fine, it didn't do it. But every time I went to try and step, it would do like a little jerk at the knee. And she just said, oh my God, you look exactly like that Soft Mint advert of Mr. Soft. Mr. Soft, won't you tell me why the world in which you're living is... That is literally how you walk. And then I watched the video and honestly, that is how I walked. That is literally how I walked. So my nickname was Mr. Soft after that. I just thought, oh, maybe it's like effects from the lumbar puncture or something. But as the days went on, my walk got worse and worse, and eventually it got to a stage where my knees were dropping. Oh, sorry. And then it got worse and worse. My knees were dropping every single step instead of like once every few steps. The doctors and the physiotherapist thought it was weird. So they gave me a walking frame to hold while I walk, just to keep me upright. And I used that for a while, and then I had to use a wheelchair when I went round. So when I asked the doctors, oh, what's going on? Is this something to do with a lumbar puncture? You know, does it happen? And he said, yeah, it can happen. And I've spoken to many people that it has happened to them. And then a few days later, they're fine and they can walk again. But they just said to me basically, oh, you'll be okay in 4 days, or you'll be okay in 3 days. They always gave me specific days. And when them four days and then the 3 days were up and I still couldn't walk, we had no idea what was going on. When I left, I asked, where can I get a wheelchair from? Because of course I couldn't go and do my shopping in Tesco, you know, almost collapse into the floor with every jerk of my knee. And they said, you can't have one from here, try a charity shop or something. And I thought that was a bit odd because, you know, hospitals should want to give you things and direct you to the right place. Luckily, I had people that I knew that were in wheelchairs, and they told me you can actually just phone an occupational therapist and they'll give you it on the NHS. So that was a bit strange, but I went home for about a week and my legs were just getting worse and worse. So I went back to my local hospital and they transferred me straight back to Bolton. I was there for a good couple of weeks. No one knew what was wrong with me. No idea. So some people were arguing that maybe it was to do with my brain tumour, and some people were saying, no, this has got to be something different. So I was tested for MS and myasthenia gravis and all sorts of things like that, but they were all coming up negative. So to this day, I'm not sure why I'm not walking. I can walk in the water. I'm finding a lot of relief with hydrotherapy because the water holds me up. My knees still do jerk underneath it, but it does help a lot. So on the 28th of July, I was able to go home from Walton and just wait for my follow-up MRIs. They gave me a follow-up MRI every month, but a lot of people who have this illness, they really struggle with people giving them MRIs. They'll just say, oh, you don't need one, see you in a year. But Walton, honestly, they monitored me so well. They wanted to see me. I literally saw someone, I think, every month for the first 6 months. So I was either having a consultation with my neurologist or neurosurgeon, or I was having an MRI, or I was speaking with my physio. Everyone was so good to me, and so many people say that they don't get any help and no MRIs, nothing, but they were so helpful with me. And then around the 8th of August, I found myself deteriorating a lot quicker than I had been, and it got to the stage where I was bedbound every single day. My head, I couldn't even lift it off the pillow some days. It got to a stage where I had to have one of my family members act as a carer for me. They had to wash me, they had to change me, they had to do absolutely everything for me. It's really difficult to have to ask for help. It's horrible. You just have to sometimes, and I try and be as independent as I can, but you have to admit defeat sometimes. You have to accept people's help, and they love you and they want to do it for you, so it's really important that you do not strain yourself and you just take their help. So I got worse and worse. I was having nosebleeds every 5 minutes, I was vomiting, I was constantly feeling nauseous. I was on high doses of Oromorph, Tramadol, Gabapentin, amitriptyline, cyclazine, ibuprofen. I was on all sorts and I was literally bound to my bed. I couldn't do anything. I was getting worse and worse, and as I got physically worse, it was definitely mentally draining. I was so depressed, so anxious. You know, I still am, but I'm a lot better these days. But at the time, I was stuck to my bed. Everyone was doing everything for me. I felt so helpless, and I felt like I got really low. I reached a massive low, and I would never like to be in that place again. But it was really difficult with not being able to do anything. You know, I had to watch my friends going out, my family going out, everyone doing things, and I was just lying in bed and I couldn't do anything. I think the thing you need to think about when you're going through this time in your life is there is always someone that is worse off than you. So you have to be grateful for all the little things. At least I'm here, I'm alive. I might not be healthy, but I've got family, I've got friends who love me, I love them. It's the only thing that kept me going, you know, seeing my family and friends and things. The headaches got worse, the eye pain got worse, the nosebleeds got worse. I was vomiting, I was not sleeping. Well, I was either having major insomnia or I was sleeping all day. There was no in between. it wasn't a case of awake all day and sleeping at night. At my most, I would go 5 days with not a wink of sleep because my body was just so awake, and I was having really bad tingles in my back, and they were jolting me awake, and they are so painful. I still do get these. You can't even lie down, you're just twitching all the time. It's so painful. You can't sleep because it's like giving you anxiety because it's itching all the time. You feel like you can't fall asleep. So I went days and days and days without sleep, and that made me a lot more depressed, to be honest. I was either awake for 5 days or I was sleeping all day, waking up for an hour, sleeping all day, waking up for an hour. There was no in between. And then on the 26th of August, I walked into my nan's house. I went to get up out of my wheelchair by the front door to walk in, and I collapsed instantly. I just fell on the floor. And I thought, oh my god, I'm being clumsy. So I tried to lift myself back up, and I fell on the floor again. After that day, I never walked again. I had to adapt to it, of course, so went round in a wheelchair after that, and I crawled everywhere because with me there's strength in my legs, there's power, I can move them, I can do everything with them. I just can't stand or walk because my knees just give way underneath me and I end up collapsing to the floor. So physio, bless them, were trying everything to help me. Everyone was confused as to why I had the strength, the movement, everything was fine, but I just couldn't walk. I could go on the exercise bike, and also I actually went into Ysbyty Gwynedd and put on full leg casts on both legs, literally from my toes to the top of my thigh, so that my knees couldn't buckle underneath me. But unfortunately, it didn't help, and I ended up just falling to the floor again. So this video was just basically letting you know what happened to me, what I went through, how I was diagnosed, and everything like that. The next video is going to be about the amazing people who fundraised for my fund and allowed me to be able to go and get my surgery in Australia. That one will be up in the next few days. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know a lot of people had questions. Many people have come up to me and said, oh, I thought you could walk a little bit, but no, I actually can't. I thought I'd clarify it in a video. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to hear more about my story, please click the subscribe button and you'll get a notification as to when my next video is up. Thank you so much. Have a great day.